Why do bad things happen to good people? So this is an important theme because many of us have experienced, probably all of us have experienced difficult times. One person wrote an open letter on the internet that said, um, I don't know if my faith is being tested or if God has really forsaken me, but I feel left, abandoned, and alone. I've been going through trials and tribulations lately, and I feel like God really has left me. When my coworker was experiencing trials, I told her, God will never forsake you. But when it comes to me, I truly feel abandoned, like I'm alone and there is no one here for me. So maybe you feel like this person felt, or you have felt this way before. And you may even wonder if I've done everything right in my life, if I've been basically a good person, why is it that I'm experiencing these trials, these tribulations? Is it because God is mad at me? Is it because he's upset with me? Is this maybe a punishment for some of my sins? Or is it does it have something to do with a trial or a test? Is he maybe testing my faith? And these are valid questions to have. Some even feel like it's so unfair that they're being put through these trials or that they're going through these tribulations that they feel like they can no longer trust God. And they actually decide that they need to abandon God, leave their relationship, and they may abandon religion altogether, become turned off to God. Some become atheists because of this very question: why are good things or bad things happening to good people? On the surface, it would seem like the universe should be set up where if you're a good person, then good things should happen for you. And if you're a bad person, then bad things should happen for you. But is that the world that we live in today? For instance, if you think back to what happened in the Garden of Eden at the very beginning of mankind's history, at that time period, something changed in the universe, something shifted in the universal scheme of things. What do you call to mind happened? Well, there was a rebellion in the Garden of Eden, right? And so the snake deceived Eve and lied to her, telling her that she could actually be like God. We can take a look at that at Genesis chapter 3. That's Genesis chapter 3. And if we're looking at verse 1, it says, Now the serpent was the most cautious of all the animals of the field that Jehovah God had made. So it said to the woman, Did God really say that you must not eat from every tree of the garden? At this, the woman said to the serpent, We may eat from the trees of the garden, but God has said about the fruit of the tree that's in the middle of the garden, you must not eat from it. No, you must not touch it, otherwise you will die. At this, the serpent said to the woman, You certainly will not die, for God knows that in the very day you eat from it, your eyes are bound to be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and bad. And so, consequently, the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was something desirable to the eyes. Yes, the tree was pleasing to look at. So she began taking of its fruit and eating it. Afterward, she also gave some to her husband when he was with her, and he began eating it. And the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. Later, they heard the voice of God as he was walking in the garden about the breezy part of the day, and the man and his wife hid from the face of Jehovah their God and among the trees of the garden. And Jehovah God kept calling out to them, saying, Where are you? Finally, he said, I heard your voice in the garden, but I was afraid because I'm naked, so I hid myself. And God said, who told you that you're naked? He said, have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat? And the man said, well, the woman you gave me to be with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree, so I ate. Well, what's happening here in this exchange now is the man and the woman, their mindset changed entirely. They lost that happy, blissful innocence that they once had. Notice that they were so pure at heart, they didn't even notice that they weren't wearing clothes. So they lived in a world that was totally peaceful, totally pure, totally good. In that world, good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. That's the world we were designed to live in. So that's why you want things to be that way, because that's the way things were originally designed to be. Unfortunately, when Adam and Eve, the only two humans on earth, decided to abandon God, they abandoned the blessing also of blissful paradisiac life in the Garden of Eden. And as a result, they had children, and those children had children who had us here in the very much non-paradisiac, non-garden in the world, alienated from God. And so it's no wonder in a world alienated from God that we would experience troubles, trials, tribulations, difficulties, injustice, oppression. And so that even if you're a good person, you're not experiencing good for the good that you do necessarily. It's not always working out to your favor. And so if you're going through some hard times, if you've experienced some difficulties, should you just conclude that it's God who's putting you through it, that it's God who's punishing you? Or should you recognize that you're not living in the time period in a world where God is making sure that only good things are happening for good people? And so you'll need to develop the faith that Joseph had. Do you remember what Joseph went through? If you turn in your book to Genesis, chapter 39, we know that Joseph had his older brothers, and his older brothers became jealous of him. Joseph was not a bad person. He hadn't done anything especially harmful. He hadn't hurt anyone. But his brothers didn't like the attention the father gave them and these beautiful dreams that Joseph was having and the way he talked about himself. The brothers just didn't like him, felt jealous. And so, as you recall, they hatched a scheme to kill him. And then they decided maybe we're not going to kill him, but we're going to throw him down here in this well, this empty watering well. There's a deep pit. And then we're going to tell our father that he died. Well, while Joseph was down in the well, some foreigners came by and they sold Joseph to the foreigners as a slave. So these foreigners took Joseph away, this young man, maybe just a boy, to be a slave in a foreign land. Joseph figured he probably would never see his father again. But while Joseph was living as a slave, instead of blaming God and becoming bitter, he worked hard. He continued to keep his faith in his God. And over time, he became blessed. He started to obtain higher and higher positions of authority. In fact, at chapter 39, verse 1, it says, now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and an Egyptian named Potiphar, a court official of Pharaoh and chief of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. But Jehovah was with Joseph. As a result, he became successful and was put under the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that Joseph was with him and that Jehovah was with him and that Jehovah was making everything he did successful. So Potiphar was recognizing that Joseph had his God, that he worshiped, the Most High God. And that was different from what the Egyptians worshiped because they worshiped pagan gods. And everything Joseph was doing was blessed. He was successful. He was working hard. He was honest. He was trustworthy. Verse 4 says, Joseph kept finding favor in the eyes, and he became his personal attendant. So he appointed him over his house and put him in charge of all that was his. From the time he appointed him over his house and in charge of all that was his, Jehovah God kept blessing the house of the Egyptian because of Joseph. And Jehovah's blessing came on all that he had in the house and in the field. Now, notice where Jehovah God is actually involved. Notice that God wasn't the one who put Joseph in slavery. God wasn't the one who put Joseph in the pit. God was the one who blessed Joseph for his faith, meaning he was still a slave. But because Joseph made the most of it, because Joseph didn't become bitter about it, because Joseph didn't develop a bad attitude, he looked at it as an opportunity to continue to demonstrate loyalty to his God. God blessed him. How? By removing all of his trials? No. By simply blessing the household that Joseph was serving under. By simply blessing the work of Joseph, allowing him to find some ease, to find some favor in this position. Do you notice how Jehovah your God works? When you're praying to him for a blessing, for help, for deliverance from your trial, don't miss the fact that he is blessing you, that there are things he's doing for you, that he is helping you to cope. He is helping you to overcome, even though he's not taking the trial completely away from you. Even though he's allowing you to go through it, he's allowing you to endure it. He is the one that is strengthening you. And in the end, he is the one that will deliver you. But he didn't take the trial away from Joseph. So notice in verse 6, it says, he eventually left everything that was his in Joseph's care, and he gave no thought to anything except the food he was eating. Moreover, Joseph grew to be well built and handsome. Now, Joseph is growing up, he's coming into his maturity, and he's a handsome man. But Potiphar trusted him so much that Potiphar didn't even know what was going on in his own business, in his own household. Joseph was running the business. Joseph was running the slaves. Joseph was keeping the house in order. He's running the whole thing. The only thing Potiphar, the master, had to worry about was the food, putting it in his mouth, because the food was already made. The meal was prepared. Everything was perfect. That's how good of a slave Joseph was. Do you show that level of faith and work, that work ethic in everything you do? Do you make sure that everything you do is to God's glory, like Joseph did? This brings glory to God when you, as a servant of God, do things well. Verse 7, it says, now after these things, the master, the wife of the master, began to cast eyes on Joseph and say, lie down with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, here my master does not know what is with me and in the house, and he has entrusted everything he has to my care. There is no greater in this house than I am, and he has not withheld anything from me at all except you, because you are his wife. So how can I commit this great badness and actually sin against God? See what trial Joseph now finds himself under? The temptation, actually. Potiphar's wife decides, I'm not going to be happy with being in this beautiful house with this beautiful position married to this rich man. No, I want more. Greed. Is that God? Would that be God inspiring her to be greedy so that he can test Joseph? No, no. God does not inspire greed, right? Because that's opposite of God. So who is really behind this woman and her wickedness? Well, more likely Satan, the devil, or at the very least, her own wicked inclination. She decides that she's going to be wicked. And now this will cause suffering for Joseph. Why does Joseph suffer even though he's a good person? It is not because God is testing him. It is because he lives in a wicked world with wicked people who do wicked things and have wicked intentions. And this woman is one of them. And so Potiphar's wife says, lie down with me. And Joseph says, no, my master trusts me with everything except you. You're his wife. You're the one thing. Why would I sin against him and sin against my God? He recognized that it would harm his relationship with God for him to get involved in this adultery, the sexual immorality that is filth. And he wanted to stay clean for his relationship with his holy God. He made the right choice. And so he's going to be rewarded, right? Well, let's see how the story goes. At verse 9, it says, or I'm sorry, at verse 10, it says, so day after day she spoke to Joseph, but he never consented to lie with her, nor remain with her. But on one of the days, when he went into the house to do his work, none of the household servants were in the house. Interesting. Verse 12. Then she grabbed hold of him by his garment and said, lie down with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled outside. As soon as she saw that he left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she began to cry out to the men of her house and say to them, look, he brought us this Hebrew man to make us a laughingstock. He came to me to lie down with me, but I began to cry at the top of my voice. Then as soon as he heard me raising my voice and screaming, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. After that, she laid his garment beside her until his master came into the house. Then she told him the same thing, saying, the Hebrew servant you brought to us came to make me a laughingstock. But as soon as I raised my voice and began to scream, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. And as soon as his master heard the words, the wife spoke to him, saying, these are the things your servant did to me. His anger blazed. So Joseph's master took him and gave him over to the prison, the place where prisoners of the king were kept under arrest, and he remained there in prison. So, as you see, Joseph didn't do anything wrong. He refused this woman again and again and again. Finally, she plotted against him by having all the witnesses moved out of the area. And then when she's alone with Joseph, she grabs him by the shirt, and Joseph lets the shirt go. It might have been like a vest that he had on, and he flees out, and she's got the shirt. So she starts screaming and making a show so that she can hide her own embarrassment, her own filth, by accusing him of doing something with her. How wicked. So Joseph was thrown in prison. Where's the justice? That's my question for you. Where is the justice? Joseph didn't do anything wrong, but he goes to jail and she continues to be free. Where is the justice? Where is his reward for doing good? Because Joseph lived in a wicked world with the influence of Satan, the devil, with sinful, wicked people, bad things are happening to a good person. Can you relate? Can you relate to a time that you had to endure injustice, that no one believed you, that people accused you, even though you were the one that was attacked, even though you were the one that was plotted against, even though someone was trying to do something wicked to you? And where was the justice? You lived in a wicked world full of wicked people. Was it God testing you, putting you through a trial? God didn't make this happen to Joseph. Joseph is thinking, perhaps, this has gone from bad to worse. It was already bad enough I was sold as a slave. Now I'm in jail. That's even worse. At least I had a job, I had a position, I had some type of dignity and respect in what I did. Now I'm just a prisoner. I can't do anything of any note. What am I going to do in prison? Is now the chance for Joseph to give up on serving his God? Is now the chance for Joseph to become bitter? What would you have done? Well, gratefully, we have the story recorded here. Joseph didn't become bitter. Although the situation was bad, he even had uh, iron put on his neck and chains put on his wrists. But Joseph didn't become bitter about the situation. He continued to serve his God. And he even got some opportunities to preach to some of the people that were in jail with him. And then he would say, like, hey, put in the good word with the king for me. And when they would get out, they would forget about Joseph. But one day, one of the people that he had interpreted a dream for, which was a gift that God had given him, one of the people finally remembered him after they got out of jail. And because the king at that time was having some dreams, the person recommended Joseph to the king, Pharaoh, the highest in the land. Well, I'll spare you the details, but long story short, Joseph got out of jail. He got an opportunity to interpret dreams for the king. And the king was so pleased, so impressed that he rewarded Joseph with the highest position in the known world, which was second only to him, the Pharaoh. He gave Joseph the highest position. So now Joseph was a king, just like he dreamed when he was a child. It's quite miraculous, isn't it? So in the end, there were blessings, but Joseph had to endure years of trials. And there were tests, but the tests did not come from his God. The tests came as a result of the world he lived in and the wicked people and their sinful inclinations. The tests came as a result of imperfection. The tests and the trials were not from God, but he made sure he gave the answer to God. Our trials, like Joseph's, are an opportunity to show in no uncertain terms where we stand, where our loyalty will be. So where will your loyalty be in your next test, in your next trial? Will you take the opportunity to prove that you are God's loyal servants, that you serve Jehovah God, the Most High, over all the heavens and the earth? Or will you give in and become angry and bitter and give up? One of the reasons that people become so discouraged is because they actually think that what's happening to them is because God is making it happen to them. But God cannot be behind something evil or wicked. A good scripture for this is James chapter 1, verse 13. James 1, verse 13 says this: when under trial, let no one say, I am being tried by God. For with evil things, God cannot be tried, nor does he himself try anyone. But each one is tried by being drawn out and enticed by his own desire. Then the desire, when it has become fertile, gives birth to sin. In turn, sin, when it has been carried out, bring forth death. According to the Bible, When you are under trial, you are not to say that you are being tried by God. God is testing you. You're not to say that. It's in the scripture. According to the Bible, God does not use evil things to test people. Wow. Isn't that amazing? When you are under trial, you are not being tested by God is not putting you through those bad things. And that makes sense because he's a God of love. And here it is in black and white. It is saying that we cannot blame God. We cannot hold God as the one who is making these bad things happen. So when our loved one was killed in an accident, we don't say, "Oh, God killed our loved one because he wanted to take him away." Or when you lose your house and your money and everything, you don't say, "God is punishing me," or "He's putting me through a test." No, for with evil things, God does not try anyone. In fact, if you go a step further, verse 16, look verse 16, it says, "Do not be misled, my beloved brothers. Every good gift, every perfect present is from above, coming down from the Father of the celestial lights, who does not vary or change like the shifting shadows. It is his will to bring us forth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creation. Every good gift, every perfect present is from God." That's what you ascribe to God. That's what you say, "God gave me this." When you get the good gifts, the perfect present, something that you needed right when you needed it. You say, "Oh, I needed to hear this talk right now." You ascribe that to God. Someone brings you the food right when you needed the food. The money comes in the account right when you needed the money. Whatever the blessing comes, you get the house closing goes through right when you needed it. The perfect gifts, the perfect presents, the good gifts, those come from God. And that makes sense because Satan is not going to give you the good gifts. He doesn't want to bless you. He wants you to struggle. And he wants you to blame it all on God. That's why the scripture in verse 16 says, "Do not be misled." Don't be tricked. Don't be fooled into thinking that God is the one to blame for all of the bad, because it's Satan. Just like in the book of Job, when the fire came down out of the sky, it was made to look like God, but it was the devil. When the Chaldeans came and killed all of Job's servants, it was made to look like God, but it was the devil. When the windstorm came and blew the roof down off of the house and killed Job's children, it was made to look like God, but it was never God. It was always the devil. Do not be misled, my brothers. Do not be misled. Don't be tricked. Don't be fooled. God is love. He's giving you all the good, all the gifts, all the perfect presents, all the blessings are from him. So thank him, rejoice with him, show gratitude for God, and resist the devil. How? By making sure that your works, that your actions, that your conduct are bringing praise to God always, especially when you're having a hard time.